Um, uh, is a way to refer to someone who makes a living as a free diver, someone who jumps in seawater and collects shellfish without the aid of an air tank or even a snorkel. It literally means woman of the sea. Within the last 140 years, this word has also become connected to pearl divers, but that is a relatively recent development because we're talking about a tradition that has been practiced by women in Japan for well over 1,000 years, probably closer to 2,000. It's also the title of a 2018 short film written, directed, and performed by one woman, Julie Gauthier. Now, this film is freely accessible on the internet. It's awesome beyond words, and it's like 5 minutes long. So, if you haven't seen it, go ahead and give up right now on whatever this is you and I got going on here. Yeah, stop this video and look for the Vimeo link in the description below. Actually, if you don't just pause the video, but close the browser completely, then when you come back, I'll end up getting twice as many of the views. Okay, we ready? The film we all just watched, or some of us may have just rewatched, opens on a solitary figure standing in the rain in the dark. The camera zooms in slowly, locked onto her eyes, which she closes. This subtle action, made enormous by an extreme close-up, triggers a change of scenery to some other place where all directions are brightly lit and clear. Not that she would notice. Her eyes remain closed even after she is transported. So, what does this person who closed her eyes only to find herself in a wide open space she can't be bothered to look at do? Well, when she found herself there, she was lying down, so the first thing she did was sit up. Pretty unremarkable, huh? Right. Look, this film is as dense and demanding of revisits as any good poem could be. There are remarks to be made for each and every shot. It was just a 5-minute film, but there ain't no 5-minute commentary on what we just saw. She was lying down. She sits up. Then she hunches over as someone might who has just undergone something excruciating. And here I am, shamelessly taking the end of the film and reading it back up and into this early scene. But come on, elbows on knees, heaving shoulders. This is what fatigued people look like when they're trying to catch their breath. Next, she rises deftly and firmly to her feet. And then we see the first in an incessant torrent of full-body gestures which are as graceful and dazzling as they are alien. These movements never settle comfortably within the boundaries of what one might consider dance. There's too much acrobatics. But it isn't just an underwater balancing act either. No, dance and acrobatics. It's always more than just one, but it's too seamless to be considered a mere composite of two separate activities. So what is it? I don't know. So here I go, trying to comment on something I know not what. The initial gesture is vertical, with the arm straight up, straight down, then to her belly, where one clenched fist, cradled in the other hand, seems to catch all that is inside her, and what? She sets something free, or is something rent from inside her? This is where, for me, the performer's movements begin to gesture at a broader either-or question framework by which we can interpret the movements she makes. Is this woman expressing herself as an active agent, or is she disclosing herself as one acted upon? Is she carrying out skilled maneuvers, Or is she exposing how some maneuvers, despite great skill, just can't ever possibly be carried out? These either-or question pairs never get resolved as far as I can see, but I don't think the film's playing with ambiguity. No, I think the character in this film first presents to us what it is like to face an exclusive disjunction, an imperatival either this or that, only to then demonstrate for us exactly what it feels like to fail equally miserably at both the either and the or. To put it all in a single word, grief. Let me give you a specific instance in which the predicament of either and or, both being impossible, inhabits the body of our solitary and submerged figure. Early on, with light cascading down from a corner of the dive tank, our dancer, acrobat, freediver, she takes 2 resolute strides forward toward the camera. She walks. She walks underwater. Now, granted, this isn't anything supernatural like you might find in a gospel account, but I kind of want to say that walking underwater is hard. Technically, though, I'd be wrong to say that. This isn't a hard thing to do. It's just plain impossible. It cannot be done, not by anyone. Let's let some folks from the annals of all things supernatural give it a shot. Maybe a literary specter like Jacob Marley, or some marvelous avenging movie aqua hero. Or maybe the Son of Man himself, Jesus of Nazareth. It doesn't matter who. Let any and all them folks walk around underwater, film it, show the footage to some other audience, and what they would see are people who are impervious to the weight and substance of water, characters who can transcend the water's restrictive presence and move about as if it weren't there. Be they pure fiction or more truly human than any human who has ever been, they still wouldn't actually be underwater in the full colloquial sense of that term, because they wouldn't be beset by any difficulty. But the performer we just watched, and the character she is portraying, this woman never at any moment ceases to feel the weight of the water she is under. She is ever always put upon by an immense and unyielding environmental constraint. She's 10 meters down in a tank with nothing. Then, in an elegant display of strength, dexterity, and balance, she makes out as if she's walking, and walking confidently at that. It's magnificent to watch, but it's not walking. When you're underwater, like really underwater, you can't walk. The best you can do is find the strength to pretend. Come to think of it, when you're underwater, you can't actually do any of the things I said she did before. Lying on the ground? Can't do that. Have you ever tried? In a pool, if you get anywhere close to lying down, it'll be anything but relaxing. The slightest flinch will set you off in an awkward rotation. If you manage to put on the airs of lying down, it'd be the exact opposite of restfulness. Because you can't lie down underwater. You can't sit up, you can't rise to your feet, and you most certainly cannot catch your breath. All you can do is pretend to do such things. And this categorical obligation to pretension while under intense duress is inescapable. And here, of course, I'm speaking only of the character. The actor has at least one safety diver, maybe 2, in fins just off screen at the ready to guide her up by the arm to the surface at the end of each take. You can watch how they do it in a making of video. It's kind of neat. But the character we watch in the film, she knows full well that her gestures are shackled to parody. As long as she's trying to live in an unlivable sphere, she won't ever succeed in freeing herself from tawdry imitations, making a show out of movements that she could only ever make for real in a place she is so clearly not. I can't walk. I can only pretend to walk. That is an either. Next comes a corresponding or. In the very next sequence, she performs what it's like to be blown backward. That is, prevented from moving forward. And this make-believe thwarted action doesn't come across any more authentic than that make-believe successful action she just pretended to do. She couldn't present herself to be walking when all that was available to her was pretending to walk. And she couldn't present herself as someone prevented from walking forward either, for the exact same reason. You can't be frustrated at not being able to do a thing if you were only ever going to be pretending to do it in the first place. This is a double bind. There's no way I can show myself to be someone who's doing the thing, nor can I show myself to be someone who was stopped from doing the thing. If I do anything, I'll be pretending, and if I'm pretending to be something, I'm not being myself. A context such as this, which twists your arm even tighter until you start pretending, is a type of double bind. The mutually obstructive exhortations are as follows. Go ahead. Try and show yourself to be doing a thing. You'll fail. Oh, and by the way, go ahead and try to show yourself to be someone who has been stopped from doing that thing you just failed to do. You're going to fail at that too. So the character pretends to walk forward, pretends to get blown backward, and then what? She crumples to the floor. Or pretends to. And why would she pretend to do that? Because that's what you're supposed to do when you've been rendered powerless? Okay. Her limbs flailing and twisting until she hits her back with one leg bent so awkwardly behind her. And then she does something natural looking and seemingly effortless, and yet so far off the map of expectations. Now, let's recall. We've already seen her imitate rising to her feet. That's not what she does the second time she came up off the floor. No, this is that moment where it's like something hooks her sternum and pulls her whole body up to set her on her feet. What she's actually doing is lifting herself up with her toes, lifting her entire body with the top sides of her toes, 1 foot. That is no imitation of anything people ever do on land, nor is it anything like what swimmers or divers might do either. This movement, and I can't support the claim I'm about to make, but this is YouTube, so I'm going to make it anyway. And I don't mean this as an exaggeration. I just think it's true. What she does with her body in that moment is something no human being had ever done before. Begin with the fact that so few of us could, but I mean, who would? Who would ever go through the trouble to do that? And why? And why with such grace? On my first viewing, this was the moment that jarred me. I was like, wait. She was a spinning pile of legs and arms on the floor, and just like that, now she's standing? This isn't animation. This is one woman's spooky mastery of her extreme environment. And I say this both about the performer and the character she plays in the film. That solitary person, it could be that at that very moment, she recognized this startling occurrence for what it was, a singular, incomparable act that is, in any heretofore known context, totally unprecedented. And that could get you thinking. The train of thought I'm imagining might go like this. I can do things. So any imitation of normalcy at this point would be a farce. That's settled. But if imitation's out of the picture and I can still do stuff, doesn't that mean that now I am free? Free to be unique, uniquely me. I'm making a funny face right now. That's just means don't get too sucked in by any of the excitable affectation I'm putting into my tone of voice. Let's just follow the film. What she does next is to turn 90 degrees and get blown back once more. But this time, it doesn't end in a crumpled mess of spinning legs and arms on the floor. No, it morphs into what I think an ice skater might call a double Lutz. Except she does both twists on the way up, stops at the apex, and floats straight down to stick a stationary landing. So, a double Lutzish thingy that would probably go unrecognized as such to any actual figure skaters. As I've already conceded, I am here trying to describe something I know not what. So humor me as I return to cavalier and utterly unverifiable claims. Athletic humans across the ages have landed and failed to land all manner of wild and harebrained leaps. And still, I don't think anyone in history could have ever even thought to attempt to do what she did in her first jump. Because it's basically nonsense until you see it done. The line between nonsense and extraordinary gets a little more than smudged. Ballerinas are people who can spin on their toes, and of course it does nothing to detract from their extraordinary feats when we learn that they do these spins wearing specially designed shoes that have a reinforced toe box and a shank to support the sole of the foot just enough. The performer in this film just spins barefoot on her big toe. We have departed station extraordinary and are heading straight toward the unfinished bridge of nonsense. It's probably safe to say at this point the CGI cinema sorcerers in Hollywood have crossed the uncanny valley. They can create pictures that just look 100% real, human. But Madame Gautier in this film, she crossed that same valley going the other way. She's 100% real, human, and the unsettling part of what she does is that it's not animated. Now, if there is an aura of absolute freedom and irrepressible power emanating from the character in this film, it is short-lived. And here I'm getting back to that funny face I made earlier while I was talking about freedom to be me. And understand, she does take flight. No doubt about that. But the either-or question of agency persists in framing her movements. Am I jumping and leaping like no one has ever done before? Or am I just getting shoved around? This confusion is never resolved. It just increases. Even the camera loses its rectitude. And then come the flash cuts. Back to the dark world in which she began, the rain-soaked world of one woman standing. We see 4 brief close-ups. First, a droplet falls from her chin. Like a tear? No. There was rain everywhere. That droplet was just one little bit of the drenching ubiquity that happened to be on her face until it wasn't. No, not a tear. The second flash cut. Droplets hit her shoulder and splatter like they're hitting stone. Third, we see movement. Of the 2 worlds we view, dark, light, standing, submerged. If the one that is real is the place where breathing can happen, then this third flash cut is when we see the first and only real world movement, apart from eyelids. It's It's like one finger, but not even as distinct as that might imply, because the second finger maybe sort of moves too. Again, a droplet falls just like it surely would have anyway, even if she hadn't moved at all. And that tiny, inconsequential motion, it would appear, is all she can muster in the real world, in the dark world of breathing. And yet, apparently, if we're to believe the sequencing in which that flash cut is interjected, that tiny, completely inconsequential movement felt to her like she was, well, I'm sure you remember at least some of the next tier unthinkableness she displays in the climactic scene of the movie. And in the fourth and final flash cut, her eyes open. Meanwhile, the body in the other world, the body that can fly, it collapses, pretends to collapse. Then she opens her eyes in the tank as well, giving a haunting look ever so slightly off camera, like she sees us, the audience, the ones to whom she would be communicating if she had the means to make an earnest gesture. But her gaze is that middle distant nowhere type that shows us she is so far away from us. She couldn't even be bored with us, let alone have anything to tell us. And that's how we arrive at the closing shot, in which we see the first and only underwater action performed that is not pretend. All of it so far. Pretending to lie down, pretending to sit up, pretending to jump, pretending to be free. It isn't until she exhales that she presents herself to be doing the very thing she is actually doing. And it so happens that being submerged is precisely what makes it so unforgettably visible. Here, she escapes that double bind I outlined before, but, can't help but notice that authenticity doesn't exactly put her in an enviable position. After that exhale, taking a breath is now the impending necessity. That's clear. But is it possible? The surface has come into view, a shadowy reflection ripples above her, but is she going to surface? For the character in this film, that is far from a settled matter. Okay, YouTube, back to just you and me. This video is only part one in a two-part series. Just an essay, sort of an attempt at empathy to what it feels like, that specific sense of failure that, when you're grief-stricken, will attend your every effort to enact a semblance of normalcy. So far, I've just tried to give a verbal account to the feelings I think the film depicts visually. In part two, I will again center on the experience of this same solitary character, but we'll examine bereavement from the outside. I'll lay a groundwork by presenting the structure of person-to-person relations which hold healthy human desires steady, and then I'll outline one particular way that structure might just collapse into shambles. In this video, we saw how, from the inside, grief may feel like you're trapped between a damned when I can and a damned when I can't. But from the outside, she doesn't appear to be wedged in great tightness or even between two things at all. No, it's more like she's entirely and irrevocably untethered from that which made her herself. A crewless, unmoored vessel listing in open waters would be a similar image, but this film depicts a human being, a living, not quite breathing, but still moving human. Perhaps we call her a woman of the sea. Just of the sea, and absolutely nothing else.